Hi, everyone. My name is Marcel. I'm a developer advocate at Google, based in Singapore, and working with Southeast Asia region partners to integrate new APIs or new products, and as well to make sure they are adopting the new features that we are releasing on every new Android version. While we help them integrate those, we as well collect their feedback that is really used for our internal teams at Google. So last year, one of the things I was working with was the Play in-app review API. I help partners integrate them and provide feedback to internal teams and help them improve the API based on their feedback. So today, what I want to cover here is some of the implementation details and go cover some of the misconceptions and common issues that developers have faced through this time and I've seen online. Before we start, let's look at what was the old way. Before, any application would have some sort of custom UI in order to request for a user to review. For example, here the user will, the application will show custom UI where the user can decide to rate the application. And the moment that the user decides to rate, it will be redirected to the Play Store via an intent that goes directly to the application's details. There are two main issues on this way. One is that you are actually sending the users outside of your application. So you're changing the context and the scope, and you might be not getting this user back. So because every application always tries to keep the users within their context. Another issue here is that the user might be confused where exactly it needs to rate. Because even if there is a place on this detail page, the user might not find it or might actually be confused because I already provided some sort of feedback within your custom UI. On top of that, there are some applications that misbehaves a bit by only redirecting the user to the Play Store when they provide, for example, 5 stars within their customized UI. So the teams at Google work together to find a way that we can improve this flow for the users and for the developers. So they created a new way via the in-app review API that allows users to safely review within the context of the application and knowing that they are reviewing to the Google Play directly. And at the same time, provide a way for developers to trigger the review flow at their best convenience on the right points of the application. So here, the application might decide it's the right moment to request for a review. The user will see this bottom sheet dialog where they can input 5-star, for example, and let an optional review. And once they submit the review, the dialog might dismiss automatically. What you need to know as well is that the user might decide not to review, and the application will not know. So we are protecting users to let them decide if they want to review or not without letting the applications know, to avoid abuse and protect the user privacy. Because of how this API is built and the requirements it has, it's really important to understand the different items. So in one hand, the user needs to have a Play Store account. So this is normally a Gmail account that is linked on their devices. And the user must have the Play Store installed on the device. Otherwise, the review will not show up. As well, the library has a hard limit on the Android version that it only works from 5 onwards. You have as well to publish your application. Otherwise, the user will not be able to review anything. So it's important that if you are developing a new application and trying this API, you should upload it at least into the internal test track. Once all this is fulfilled, you can integrate the PlayCore library. That is the library that includes the review API, among other things. Then for the integration steps, it is pretty simple. There are 3 main steps. One being the creation of the instance for the review manager. So basically, you pass the application context into the review manager factory to get an instance of the API that will allow you to then call the request for a review. This step, we call it preloading, because you are requesting to the Play Store that your application wants to trigger a review at some point on the future. On the moment that you get this review info object, then you are allowed to launch it. That on the launch phase, you need to pass an activity in order to associate the request to your application. Think it as a star activity for result. As you might have seen here, I'm using the PlayCore KTX version, and the request review and launch review are asynchronous call. So make sure to adapt your code for that. If you are not using the KTX or you are using the Java version, then you will have to handle these through callbacks. So again, you create it, you preload it on the moment that you think that you're going to ask for a review. And then on the moment that you think that your logic applies, that is the best moment to launch for the review, you call launch to display the review data. So now let's quickly go through how it works on a really high level. Basically, there is your application that includes the PlayCore library, that is a wrapper that handles the communication with the Play Store. On the moment that you request for a review, the Play Store are going to validate certain things. One of them being as well a quota to avoid applications requesting multiple reviews on a short term and avoid over-triggering the user for a review. The Play Store as well will check with the backend if the application is valid, if there is the user account has installed the application, and signature checks and other validations that will eventually return a result to the Play Store to let them decide if the review dialog can be shown. Then the PlayCore will eventually launch the review, and the Play Store, based on the validations that it performed before, decides to display the review dialog or not. So because there are different moving pieces and a lot of different requirements, it's important to know that the testing part is a bit tricky. And here I try to put it on a table that covers the different 4 ways to test this API. The first one will be through the fake review manager instance. This is a special implementation that is included in the PlayCore library that basically you are faking the API, allowing you to use it for unit testing or integration tests, since it always completes. So the moment you request review, it will always return an object, and the moment that you launch for the review, it will always complete without showing any UI. It's really just to test that the integration or the unit test happened properly, and after completion, your flow continues as expected. For developing or as well for internal testing, the best way to do it is with the internal test track. This is important to get it right, because basically you need a device with an account that is part of the internal test track. So has joined the track and has installed at least once the application through the Play Store. On that moment, you can, the application will skip certain checks. For example, when you request a review, there will not be a quota enforced, or the signature check might not be validated. This allows you to test the integration of the API directly from Under Studio, for example. You can sideload the application, and then since there is not a validation on the signature, the dialog will display. And since there is no quota, it should display all the time you request for it. For other ways of testing as well, you can use the internal app sharing. For example, here it allows you to upload production, debug fields, whatever you want, and get a link. This link then can be shared with your QA teams or your testers. And so they can reproduce the launch flow continuously without being affected by any quota. There is a need here that the user will not be able to submit a review because the internal app sharing is not assigned to any track. So there is no place for reviewing. It's just for testing that the launch happens. For all the other tracks, so the closed track or the beta track, all the quotas and validations will be enforced. So if a user is in any of these tracks and you run your application, it will enforce the quota. It will check for the application signature and all these other things. So this is why we recommend to use the internal test track when testing this API. There is a table on the developer's documentation that we created to try to troubleshoot some of the common issues, because as you've seen, there is a bit of a tricky that you need to have the right accounts and have the Play Store and all these things. So here, this table covers some of the common issues and the solution that you have. So if in any time you are having an issue to launch the review, please go through this table, and I do believe that it might help you. So now let's go through some of the comments that I've heard around. So why is the API not providing any information? Well, as I have explained at the beginning, we focus our design on two basic terms: privacy and abuse. So we on purpose design the API in that way to ensure that the user is protected and avoid applications abusing from this. While doing that, we try to ensure as well that developers are able to trigger the review on their best place. So we believe that all in all, it provides a good, it provides privacy and abuse, but as well allows developers to safely trigger the API. Another comment I heard is the review panel comes out of the blue. Well, while that might seem true, you actually decide where is the potential best place to display the review dialog. So you, of course, want to avoid to display the review dialog on the middle of a user flow that is doing something, some user action or a game, for example. So instead, you decide when to use it, for example, after a transition of the screen or when there is an action completed by the user. So this brings to another question or comment that is, can I use the API for my rate me button? Well, as I mentioned before, the API is not a substitute of the rate me button. It does not provide you feedback if the review happened, if the user provides feedback or not. So it only informs you that the flow completed, so you should continue with your application flow. So if you decided to use this API after the user clicks on a call to action button, what might happen is that nothing happens. So the user will see a broken flow. That's why it is not recommended to use it on a rate me button. Another comment, the API is unreliable and not working. While it might seem like that, most of the time is because this API has a strict requirements and constraints. As I explained it, it's really important to get the testing part right. So having the user on the internal test track and ensuring that you met all the conditions in order to work. We have integrated this API in many partners already, and they have had great results. And the API is working reliable and as we expect. That being said, we know you want to know the quotas. There are comments that really ask for it. The problem here is that we decided to keep that as an implementation detail. One, to prevent abuse, but two, to let us as well change without binding us to certain contract. That being said, what I want to share here is that quotas are done to protect the user, to be over-triggered, but as well to give you safety that you can trigger the API many times and the user will not get overprompt. So if you trigger the API twice in the same day or twice in a row, the user might not see the review flow all the time and might just see it one time. So then maybe the next time that you trigger, it will not display till maybe after a couple of weeks. So the actual detail of when is the quota, it's not important. You just need to apply your own conditions and target the best specific point where you want to request for the API to be shown, so for the review to be shown. So summarizing what I explained, the most important thing is ensure that the user has experienced the application good enough so that they have gone through all the flows or they have gone through the most critical flow. Then trigger target places where there might be a screen transition to ensure that the dialogue comes a bit more smooth rather than on the middle of some user flow. As well, avoid calling this API from call to action buttons like rate me. For these cases, if you want to really have that, just fall back to the intent launch to the Play Store. And finally, do not over trigger the API. So every time the application opens, rather target specific places, because even if you over triggered, the quotas might enforce, and then the user might still only see the dialogue once every few weeks. But you probably want to ensure that the user has experience good enough the app. So trigger the specific place and you will get better results. So with all that, I hope that answers some of the questions that you might have had and give you a better overview of the API so you can implement it and get 5 stars. So now I will be answering some questions through the Slido, but in any case, you can reach me in the APAC platform itself on the chat or on my Twitter handle here above.
Hi, Marcel. Well, we will just wait for a minute or so if some questions pop up. If not so, you can say goodbye to your audience or invite them to your chat room. Anyways, it was an awesome talk. I really enjoyed listening. Thank you. So let's just wait for a minute or so.
All right, so since we have a question, so can I detect if the user has given a review or not? The answer is no, you cannot. So as I mentioned, the review API has been created on a way that ensures that the user has the privacy and avoids abuse. So if we would provide a result to the developers could act to it by blocking the users to go further or to as well prejudice the users and do something that it's not supposed. So even that you don't get a review through the app, you can still access to the different reviews on the Play console. So all the users that will have reviewed your app will go through the Play console where you can have your own team checking those reviews and then replying directly in the Play console or performing actions based on their reviews, maybe fixing some issues or fixing some flaws. Thanks for your tips. You're welcome. All right, seems that maybe it was clear enough. So there are no further questions. In any case, as I mentioned, please feel free to reach me through the chat room or directly into my Twitter. You can DM me and yeah, let me know how it goes. Have a great day, everyone. Bye-bye.